Look, if you got one opportunity, just one shot, sees everything you ever wanted. Who's the gun? Oh my God! The UFO has crashed. Yes, everyone, welcome to the CM Kozeman analysis of the extensive UFO government whistleblower and state revelations that have been taking place throughout the months between July and August and September of the year of our Lord 2023. This is your host, CM Kozeman. Maybe many people coming to this channel will come in through this video first because this is such a hot topic. So in case you are a first-time visitor, welcome to this channel. We tend, at the time of recording, we tend to a small but very intellectual, smart, eclectic and eccentric flock of 40,000 people. And if you like what you listen to, please consider supporting me on patreon.com. Please subscribe to this channel. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you want to leave a comment, just leave a goddamn comment because it really helps me with the algorithm. And also you can get many other things. For example, we now have a interruption. I will be right back. Sorry about that, everybody. That was a call from my day job. And yes, when he's not discussing UFO accounts or strange aerial phenomena or criminal cryptids and similar stuff, yours truly, Daddy Kozeman, is working several day jobs at the same time. Now, yes, this is a fact of life, but it's another reason for you to support me on Patreon. The more you support me, the more time I will be able to dedicate to these YouTube podcasts, which are always free. And by the way, this channel is not monetized, so I've got a gentleman's thing like that. But your Patreon donations keep me going. And I was just about to tell you that we also have a merch store. The link is in the video description. Why don't you also go there and treat yourself or your loved ones to some Kozemanite merchandise. And with that out of the way, let's go. Now, in July 2023, I think this was near the 27th of July, there was a big testimony in the US Senate, I think. It was in the US Congress. There was a hearing about UFOs and people talked about basically things to the effect that the government knew what was going on with UFOs or UAPs they called. There was this one really memorable figure called Grusch, David Grusch, that's Grusch, who went on to make a series of really extraordinary claims. He said the government has UAPs in storage. He said that the United States used this technology in the past to develop weapon systems or products. And most extraordinarily, he said that the government has access to UFO biologics. Yes, which means in government speak, actual entities. He claimed he did not see these biologics. I love this term, by the way. What's that stain on your bed? Oh, it's just some biologics. Pay it no attention. It's secret now. Anyways, so he said he hadn't seen these biologics himself, but basically the government knew something weird was going on. On top of that, there were two other people testifying alongside Grosh, and they said they were actually like far more reliable people. Like, real apologies if Mr. Grush is listening, but let's say that the way he carried himself did not look very convincing. The way he spoke, his facial expressions, of course you can't take these at face value, no pun intended, but he struck me with the air of somebody who likes telling stories and who likes to be listened to, and he struck me as a really creative individual. Let me just say that. The two other people who testified with him were more directly involved with the Air Force. I think one of them was a pilot, and they testified their accounts of their encounters with UAPs, which are just good old UFOs with a more sexy government name. And there are many cases with pilots where they sighted UAPs on a radar. I think the famous incident during this July 2023 hearing was about a TikTok shape aircraft, not the Chinese video sharing app, but the little candy, a TikTok shape UFO. So they were chasing this thing, and these things apparently had like these unnatural maneuverability capabilities. They could like basically go something like 3 times the speed of sound and do something like 90-degree turns that way, which if you know anything about physics, like if you do a maneuver like that, like forget surviving inside the aircraft, the craft itself would be torn apart by the forces incurred in the maneuver. So which brings to my mind, this thing either has some science fiction like inertial dampener. In a lot of sci-fi series like Star Trek, you hear people talk about turn on the inertial dampeners so we don't turn into mush or something. Or maybe it was a completely non-physical form of nature phenomenon. Now, when I kind of digested this US hearing, I was getting ready to do a big expose. I actually converted all of their accounts from like a voice to text format using an app. I changed the voice recordings into text, and I was planning to go over this like paragraph by paragraph. But then, I looked at myself. What are you doing, man? You are reacting to the news, and one of the key founding one of the key founding principles of this channel is that I am beholden to no one. If I react to the news, I become just like any other channel, like the Young Turks or Hassan Abi or stuff like that, which is great actually, but I want to do my stuff. So I kind of shelved that. But now I unshelved it, and these Mexico revelations are so weird that we now have to do a preamble discussing this US government Congress hearings first. Was it the Congress or was it the goddamn? Yes, it was the Congress. So yes, in my mind, there are 2 things going on here. This is like Daddy Kozman's official analysis of the whole thing. There are 2, maybe 3 different things going on here. The first of them is that in my understanding, all of these pilots, including those who testified at the Congress, really saw something real, quote unquote. I mean, whether this was a TikTok craft or a ball of light that maneuvered at unbelievable speed, that's beside the point. I know from many personal accounts, for example, when I used to work as a editor, our chief editor was a guy from Cuba. He was a very crazy and resourceful and like solid guy. This guy had a like more real life understanding of people and what makes people tick. He kept telling us that like his father was actually a jet pilot for the Cuban Air Force. And this is one of the strange vagaries of history. The Cuban Air Force was called to intervene in the Angolan Civil War in Southeast Africa. And this was like back in the 70s or the 80s. He told us that his father, when he was a jet pilot flying like missions in Angola, regularly saw things like these UAPs flying improbably high, improbably fast, and all the pilots, this guy said, knew that something like this was just real. They assumed it was like an American secret aircraft, but he also claimed that near Angola, his father saw these things come out of the sea. And remember, in the US Congress hearings, there was also an account about a patch of the sea boiling over. And like these UAPs just, flying out of that hole, all like globes of light traveling improbably fast. So maybe something similar. So the way I understand it, this long aside from this Cuban friend's father's account aside, something natural like this might be going on, and the reports that planes and pilots around the world have of these things are probably real, if you consider like seeing something that cannot be explained as a real incident. My personal understanding of this phenomenon is that most of these people see something real, but it is not an alien craft with actual dudes inside pulling levers or like pushing buttons and like piloting the thing. Instead, this is like probably a natural phenomenon similar to ball lightning, but a kind of phenomenon that's so interesting and like outside our understanding that we just need several 2 or 3 more revolutions in our understanding of science in order to really understand what these things are. Certainly, if you look at ball lightning, it's a very little understood phenomenon. There are many atmospheric phenomena that people don't quite exactly understand. These include things like red sprites, which occur at the highest layers of the atmosphere, and they just look like these like silent red streaks of lightning. They almost look like octopi or like biblically accurate angels. So go look them up, red sprites. So there are things like this. Another phenomenon which is like frightfully real but nobody can understand is this thing called earthquake light. And if you do not know, in my home country Turkey, in February 2023, there was a series of huge earthquakes. Tens of thousands of people got killed. I think we are still processing that trauma, to be honest. And like there are records of these things happening. Just before the earthquake, the entire sky lights up. It's not like a lightning, but as if the sky is another layer in Photoshop and somebody just inverts the color of the sky from black to white. The entire sky lights up for a brief millisecond and then goes back. Now, one of the country's top earthquake scientists was actually asked on TV about what these earthquake lights might be, and he's a true man of science, Mr. Celal Şengör, and he just said, we don't know. And I really remember this on the TV. The guy asking the question says, well, like, could it be something to do with lava or geology? No, he says, no, we just don't know. So I think there are many things that we just don't know about the atmosphere, these could be like, I don't know, they could be anything. They could be electrical discharges in the atmosphere, or they could be things resulting from the friction of geological plates. We just don't know, but I'm ready to accept this as a natural phenomenon. The other point made in the US Congress hearings about biologics or like craft recovered by the United States military and stuff, I just think it's like a lie, to be honest. I don't know why people would make such lies, but certainly throughout society, especially in financially impoverished, uncertain days like the times we are going through, there's a certain need to believe in something from beyond. And I think it's just this desire for something completely extraordinary to come out of the background and just like put an end to our boring normie existence. So there's a desire to believe, and when there's a will, there's a way. If there's a desire to believe, then there's a desire to lie. Some people say this is like for the gay ops chess in order for the government to basically lay a smoke screen with this like charlatans, and so they can cover up the real aliens. I don't believe that. I think like Grush is just a creative guy. He might be doing this for clout. He might be doing this because he has personal issues. And if you of course look at Mr. Grush's background, he seems to have had like certain nervous breakdowns and like suicide attempts and stuff. So he seems to be a colorful individual. Let's just leave it at that. So long story short, UAPs probably real. Biologics, don't count on it. But there's something more going on at these Congress hearings that nobody really touched upon. And let me tell you what it is. As in all things, these UFO statements also have a political dimension, and almost everybody evaluated them at face value. You know, they discussed like, oh, well, are UFOs possible? Do they really have biologics, etc., etc.? But few people realized that this was a symptom of the government and the military-industrial complex in the United States becoming so bloated and so labyrinthine and opaque that, you know, now there is space in these unaccountable war and economy machinations, for the lack of a better word. Now there's space in them for people to seriously discuss biologics, or people like Mr. Grush to come out and like talk and become famous. It's just a symptom of like basically how unfeasibly bloated, ornate and baroque governments have gotten across the world. It's almost like something from out of 1984. And if you ever had any business with the government, it could be something to do with taxes. I hope not, but something to do with the judiciary or like zoning issues and stuff. You will know that how inefficient and replete with corruption some governments are. Granted, the US government might be like better off than many other governments in the world, but that just goes to prove the point. I mean that now you got lots of people who don't know what they're doing or who are just having a kind of loose time, basically making an entire living and entire careers in the military private sectors, especially the dark shadowy world of the military private government netherworld that is the US government. And if you want to actually learn more about this thing, I would recommend a great book to you. It is called I Could Tell You, But Then You Would Have to Be Destroyed by Me. Let me just look it up. It's a book by Trevor Paglen. Actually, you could look at any books by Trevor Paglen. The name is spelled TrevorPaglen, and he is an artist who started out documenting these strange military patches from classified government programs. And then he has an amazing book called Blank Spots, The Dark Geography of the Pentagon's Secret World. He's got another book called Torture Taxi, the CIA's covert torture program, basically. So he shows you in his work, he started out as an artist, but now he's become something more. He shows you in his work how vast sums of money are churning around these secret programs, these secret unaccountable ecosystems, basically, and the kind of people who make their living there. And I think like it's just a symptom of that, Somebody like Grush can come out of this dark netherworld, spit lies and everybody listens. And it's just like a precautionary sign of the way our world is headed. And now let us move on to the Mexican incident, okay? And US, the southern neighbor of the United States, not wanting to be left behind, perhaps, came out with a kind of own Senate testimony by a guy called Jaime Maussan, that's Jaime-Maussan, and he basically carted out like two mummies, and these guys just look ridiculous, they look like these papier-mâché dolls. They look like they would be really tasty to eat. Actually, they look like crusty. They look almost like they've been made out of brie cheese or like some exotic form of aged ham, just crunchy. Drink in that taste and texture. And basically he said these were found in Peru. They're over 1,000, basically. They're over 1,000 years. And they say that their DNA has been tested and it shows that they are not human, which are actually very interesting claims. Now, before we go on, like debunking this thing is ridiculously easy. I mean, just look at this thing's face. It looks like it took a big hit of weed. Like, oh, where'd you get that good shit, my man? Something like that, But before we debunk it, something about this mummy really struck me in a weird way. And I actually commented about this in an upcoming interview with my friend Rob Gauthier, the UFO Whisperer. So hello to Rob. If you subscribe to Rob's channel, just look him up on YouTube. It's ROBGAUTHIER, and his channel is also in the video description, so go there if you wanna. We also had a deeper separate discussion about these things on his channel, so also go look there and subscribe and stay tuned for our interview. It's dropping soon, I hope. And basically, these mummies, they have x-rays in them too, which look really weird and crudely simple. The bones are extremely basic. There's a series of almost snake-like ribs. They don't change in size like the ribs of any vertebrate creature would be expected to. They're just a uniform set of ribs, the same width like a column, just running up the creature's body. They're too narrow. The creature's hands have 3 digits each. But if you study the X-rays, every digit seems to be composed of like human metacarpals, so that the quote-unquote fingers are like basically metacarpals. These are the hand bones, like the bones in the middle of your hand basically. And then there's just 2 sets of metacarpals, which looks ridiculous. And if these aliens have just convergently evolved to such a degree that the entirety of their body looks very crude, but the hands just look like 2 weirdly sets of repeating metacarpals, I don't know, it must be like a real vagary of evolution. And that's all I'll say on the matter. But actually, this crudeness and this weirdness actually somehow riffs with this like one ongoing trend in UFO stories and UFO folklore. Let me just say that much. And in abduction accounts, you usually hear of the gray aliens being not real aliens. And you can even read these in stories by Whitley Strieber, who famously wrote the Communion book about his supposed experiences being abducted by aliens or encountering aliens. And actually, if you look at my channel, I got a big review, a very nice review of Communion. Basically, go watch it if you're interested in learning further about this book. But basically, throughout abduction folklore, there's this trend of the gray aliens not being actual biological entities, but actually being some like extremely sophisticated robots or bio-robots piloted by other agencies to abduct people and do their nasty deeds for them. I mean, the pilots of these gray aliens, in some accounts, they turn out to be like far scarier mantis aliens, which I guess must be biological entities themselves. Or if they're robots too, then who's guiding the guiders, you know? Or in some UFO accounts, they are piloted by the deep government or the Air Force, because I don't know why. But if you take this claim at face value, if you really believe that these entities are robots, then this bullshit thing you see in the Mexican Senate hearing and its weirdly primitive skeleton, they kind of make sense in a weird way. I mean, it's exactly like some like fake ass android puppet that maybe was created with very sophisticated technology but has since fossilized, you know. It looks like a real bad crash test dummy, if you know what I mean. Also, on the X-rays, you see 2 other artifacts in these mummies. In their chest, they seem to have this interlinked, like 2 crudely formed metal balls interlinked by a metal connection. And you know what, I don't know what this might be. It probably is something to keep the puppet together in real life. But if you use the speculative thinking process and just play along with the narrative of these things being basically bio-organic mechano puppets, basically, then this could be where maybe the hard drive is stored. You know, that whole lump of metal, it's actually not metal, but it's something called computronium, basically a dense integrated object of like, basically it's as far away from our computer chips and solid state hard drives as our solid state hard drives are as far from World War II era transistors. You know what I mean? So it's a very dense nanotechnological thinking device that coordinates the whole entity. So if you want to play with that fiction, in that respect, those artifacts can kind of make sense. But there's also something stranger. If you look at the bottom of the X-rays of these Mexican alien mummies, they seem to have some eggs there. I don't know what they were putting in there, but, you know, like, were they doing it for fun, you know? Was it meant to be yanked out in like one string of beads almost? Or were they just gestating eggs? But if they're gestating actual eggs, then it would be counter to the accepted hypothesis of these being like bioorganic robots. I don't know. But I mean, in all honesty, it seems like this guy, this Haim Maussan character, really put the eggs there, kind of wanting to look like an actual fossil, because in, let's say, like normie narratives, there's a strange semantic connection between fossils and eggs. Like if you discover a fossil dinosaur, you also expect to maybe discover its eggs. So maybe it was his like desperate attempt at verisimilitude. Let me just say that much. So there's that, everybody. My take on the US testimonies and the Mexican Senate quote-unquote revelations. What these things are, I think I've made myself clear. The UAP phenomenon likely represents a natural event that we cannot understand yet. The biologics seems to be a kind of lie concocted by the kind of personality that the massively dark, opaque, and money-rich US military-industrial complex seems to empower or at least tolerate. The Mexican thing is just, I mean, if you go to Twitter, or they call it X these days, but if you go on Twitter, this event already has been disproven by fact checkers. It seems that this Haim Maussan character has a history of like fabrications and fame seeking, basically. So he's a shady character, basically. And he has attempted these forgeries before in 2017, where he seemingly took 5 mummies again from the Nazca Line site in Peru. And basically he claimed these were aliens, but they were not aliens, long story short. There's a darker undercurrent there too. Like all these mummies, you know, I told you how their hands look like metacarpals. Well, they were all bones taken from grave robberies. So there's a dark, twisted detail in these stories as well. So this guy is a faker. I don't know why the Mexican Senate gave him the light of the day, but it could perhaps be a sign of governments all around the world being corrupt rather than an actual bona fide alien revelation. And, you know, I know many people are hungry for such a revelation to come along and sweep aside the bullshit of daily life, but unfortunately, this is not it. And as time goes on, I predict you will see more such stuff come out of places like Russia, maybe Indonesia, Malaysia. Basically, every government pen pusher and nobody who wants to be somebody will want their time in the sun, will want their 15 minutes of fame. So, you know, don't be surprised when other countries come up with their own UFO fabrications too. You know, there's a desperate need for people have a desperate need for other people to believe in them. In some people it's more acute and it's more pathological. And I mean, in the current day and age, our demystified worldview and the insane, inefficient drudgery of not just governments but also of like private enterprises, you know, they just leave people hungry for this sort of an experience. And as I told before, when there's a will, there's a way. That's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this brief analysis and I hope you listened so far. If you listened until the end, please comment "I want to believe" so we can beat the algorithm, and I also know who's been watching till the very end. Once again, consider supporting me on Patreon. If you're already a Patreon supporter, consider supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee, or maybe consider some Cozemanite merchandise. If you're already a fan of this channel, please introduce it to your friends, loved ones, people you want to date, you know, stuff like that. It's an entertaining listen, and, you know, nobody comes away without some good times and intriguing thoughts in their mind. That being said, have a nice day and goodbye. I'll see you again, and